What if I told you that a common piece of produce resting in your kitchen could be secretly undermining your cardiac health right now without a single warning sign? It feels almost impossible to accept. Yet, after spending many years treating older patients in heart care facilities nationwide, I have witnessed too many individuals arrive with conditions that were not purely the result of natural aging. Some of these crises were sparked by the very groceries they believed were protecting them. My name is Dr. Thomas, and everything I am about to reveal may completely overturn your long-held assumptions about nutritious eating past the age of 60. These are not rare imported specialties or obscure botanical ingredients. I am pointing directly at the common items you toss into a shopping cart, the ones you drop into a blender, the staples you have consumed for decades without ever pausing to question them. As your physiology shifts with time, these trusted picks can clash with prescriptions, overwork your blood vessels, throw off your cardiac pacing, and gradually dismantle the delicate equilibrium your heart needs to function properly. By the conclusion of this broadcast, you will know precisely which 5 common fruits pose a concealed threat to seniors, the reason they turn hazardous specifically after the 6th decade of life, and the immediate actions you can adopt to shield your cardiovascular system before permanent injury sets in. Please remain with me, because the knowledge you gain here might genuinely extend your longevity. If you are new to my channel, please consider following so you never overlook another health insight crafted specially for you. And if this conversation resonates, type a single 1 in the discussion area. If it misses the mark, type a 0 to guide me toward making improved material for you. Point 1. The citrus that can silently sabotage a senior's cardiac stability. Throughout much of our adult years, this particular tangy fruit has been branded as a pristine, wholesome dawn ritual, a radiant bowl on the kitchen counter, an emblem of self-care in our culture. Yet once we step into our 60s and later decades, our internal chemistry shifts in fashions we rarely notice or physically sense. The cardiac muscle grows more touchy. Prescription regimens become non-negotiable, and the edibles we once dismissed as benign can begin clashing with those drugs in ways that put monumental tension on the very pump sustaining our existence. And hardly any food is more deceptively treacherous for aging bodies than this specific citrus. The danger is not located in its sugary flavor or sharp tang, but in the potent biochemical agents concealed inside its pulp. Furanocoumarins. These substances sabotage a critical enzyme within the liver tasked with processing more than 50 widely prescribed drugs, including some of the most vital medications elderly Americans depend upon to survive. Cholesterol-lowering statins, calcium channel blockers for hypertension, rhythm-stabilizing agents for erratic pulses, and even particular anticoagulants fall into this category. When this fruit deactivates that enzyme, the circulating drug concentration does not merely stay at a therapeutic range. It rockets upward dangerously, frequently doubling or tripling without any outward signal. For the mature heart, this quiet escalation can prove disastrous. Excessive statin accumulation can irritate and degrade fibrous tissue, even within the cardiac walls themselves. Skyrocketing levels of pressure-controlling drugs can plummet your readings so severely that your heart labors to send enough blood northward to your cranium, resulting in vertigo, blackouts, or abrupt collapse. And when rhythm-regulating medications build up, they can scramble the heart's electrical circuitry so extremely that a steady pulse transforms into a perilous one. What appears to be a harmless wedge on your plate can, without your awareness, brew a tempest inside your ribcage, one capable of wrecking the fragile equilibrium your heartbeat demands. Numerous older individuals never peg this citrus as the culprit behind their symptoms. They blame advancing years, tension, or just an off day, never grasping that the very morning meal they consciously selected for wellness is covertly battering their cardiac tissue. No physician can track the exact second your drug levels become toxic. No caretaker can alert you when your hepatic enzyme shuts off. This is the breed of hazard that creeps in silence, gradually and intimately, because it hinges on what you swallow, even while all other facets of your care are flawlessly managed. The truth is not that this fruit is inherently evil. It is simply biologically forceful, too forceful for many hearts beyond 60, notably when mixed with life-preserving pharmaceuticals. And the most sorrowful element is that countless elders persist in eating it daily, oblivious that this tiny ritual could be thrusting their myocardium toward genuine, irreversible catastrophe. But if this single breakfast item can wreak such havoc undetected, what other familiar provisions could strain or even wreck the mature heart? The subsequent danger might shock you even deeper. If you are still viewing and uncovering value in these revelations, please drop the digit 1 below to signal your presence. Now we progress to the second hazard. 2. The soft, comforting staple that can silently swamp and cripple an aging cardiac system. For generations, this curved yellow item has represented the soothing food of domestic life, tender, recognizable, easy on the digestion, and simple to consume even when hunger is faint. Many seniors instinctively grab it, assuming it ranks among the most secure selections they could make. However, as the cardiac muscle matures and renal efficiency starts to wane, even a snack this ordinary can morph into an unforeseen peril. It is a fact that very few older adults ever encounter, and yet it impacts millions who unwittingly subject their hearts to quiet stress each morning. The issue does not reside in its flavor or its caloric load, but in its remarkably elevated potassium concentration. Potassium is indispensable for each heartbeat. It governs the electrical impulses that command your ventricles to squeeze and release. But past 60, particularly for those managing hypertension, sugar regulation issues, heart failure, or nephrotic challenges, the body no longer excretes potassium with the same youthful efficiency. Renal output decelerates, serum levels ascend more readily, and this marks the onset of peril, because an excess of this mineral provides no cautionary signal. There is zero discomfort, no thoracic pressure, no early murmur from your physiology that disorder is brewing. Yet internally, the surplus potassium is meddling with the exquisite electrical pacing of your cardiac muscle, rendering each contraction less sturdy, less synchronized, and far more brittle than you perceive. One single serving by itself is not the adversary. The genuine menace emerges when these are eaten habitually, at times 2 or 3 consecutively, without grasping how they intersect with the pharmaceuticals so many aging Americans rely upon. Medications like ACE inhibitors, ARBs, and agents that hold on to potassium are routinely dispensed for heart conditions and elevated pressure. These treatments already nudge potassium concentrations upward as part of their healing mechanism. When paired with potassium-dense nourishment, the outcome can be a spontaneous and hazardous spike in blood mineral content, powerful enough to break the pulse to a snail's pace or fling it into a lethal rhythm disturbance. For some elders, this elevation becomes the quiet mechanism that debilitates or obliterates the heart's natural pacing entirely. The scariest dimension is how soundlessly it unfolds. Many aging individuals interpret lethargy, feebleness, or an odd thoracic weight as nothing more than the passage of time. They never suspect their morning banana. They never conceived that something so recognizable, a staple they have eaten across a lifetime, could now be corroding their cardiac integrity without leaving a visible trace of caution. And once indicators become obvious, abrupt lightheadedness, a missed pulsation, or a fainting episode, the myocardium may already be swamped beyond repair. This does not imply you must scrub this item from your existence completely. It signals that your heart merits vigilance, reverence, and deliberate choice. Every dietary act in this chapter of life carries weight, and the staples that once buttressed your health may now call for moderation, equilibrium, and professional guidance. But if a soft, harmless-looking fruit can silently disrupt the older heartbeat, what occurs when we examine provisions that supply dense sugars in a form the aging circulatory apparatus finds even more taxing to process? The explanation sits within the next category, and its threat proves even more misleading. 3. Shriveled snacks. The sugary illusion that can incrementally batter an older cardiac system. Desiccated produce stirs a cozy nostalgia for many aging Americans. They evoke images of trail mixes on road trips, school containers packed lovingly, or the modest scattering of raisins enjoyed alongside warm cereal. They project purity, nature, wholesomeness, and reassurance. But as the heart gathers years and vascular conduits forfeit their supple responsiveness, dehydrated produce can transform into a stealth agent of duress that noiselessly nudges the circulatory mechanism toward jeopardy. What masquerades as a trivial, innocent morsel can, across months, overload the myocardium in patterns the majority of seniors never conceive. The risk ignites with density. When moisture is extracted from produce, the liquid disappears, but the sweeteners persist, condensed into a compact, potent payload. A tiny cluster of raisins or dried stone fruit harbors a saccharin burden equal to a vast bowl of fresh whole equivalents, yet it rests deceptively small and harmless inside your grasp. For an aging physiology, this abrupt fructose deluge surges into circulation at breakneck speed, catapulting glucose measurements upward in jagged, aggressive peaks. And each peak compels your vascular walls to dilate and constrict under strain, a burden the older heart is ill-equipped to manage. Repeated across seasons and years, these onslaughts fuel inflammation inside arterial linings, bulking them, hardening them, and fabricating the breeding ground where fatty deposits can accumulate silently. Here lies the actual havoc. The fusion of elevated sugar mass and instant absorption does not merely reshape your midsection. It distorts the very fabric that sustains your cardiac life. Triglyceride levels climb in reaction, clouding the bloodstream with lipids that accelerate plaque construction. Over stretches of time, this mechanism can choke the coronary pathways that nourish the heart itself, laying the foundation for chest agony, electrical chaos, or an outright infarction. What appears as an innocent handful can in truth nudge you steadily closer toward a breaking point. The psychological snare proves equally potent. Many elders migrate toward dried items because they feel straightforward, movable, and nourishing. Yet producers frequently introduce extra sweeteners or glaze the pieces in syrups that magnify the destruction. And because these items are physically small, it becomes frighteningly simple to overindulge without recognizing it. A few bonus fragments, an extra palmful, these decisions accumulate. The heart, already laboring against age-linked rigidity and diminished output, must now pump against stickier plasma, higher glucose loads, and more inflammatory friction than it was engineered to tolerate at this stage. That mounting burden can impair your myocardium gradually, mutely, and without mercy. What renders this risk so terrifying is its invisibility. You will not detect the sucrose tightening your channels, nor sense the fats climbing. The injury progresses in concealment, and many seniors only stumble upon the aftermath following a harsh event, a hospital admission, a terrifying arrhythmic episode, a vessel scan exposing hazardous narrowing. By that stage, the cardiac muscle has already borne the cost. This does not dictate you must dread every shriveled grape or dried slice, but it does insist your heart is owed prudence, alertness, and self-control, especially presently when every selection counts more profoundly than ever. And if the dense sugars in dehydrated provisions can lay such a load on the heart, envision the outcome when fruit is submerged in thick saccharin liquid, where danger lurks not solely within the flesh, but throughout the fluid enveloping it. That succeeding thread proves even more covert and vastly more widespread in domestic kitchens. If you are still engaged and finding these truths worthwhile, please type the digit 1 in the comments to confirm your presence. Now, we push onward to hazard number 4. 4. Tinned produce swimming in thick liquid sweetness, the concealed pleasantness that can progressively injure and enfeeble an aging cardiac engine. Across multiple generations, preserved fruit has stood as an icon of coziness in our households. The yielding slices presented at family gatherings, the sugary segments offered to little ones, the easily opened containers stocked in the cupboard for emergencies. They feel recognizable, handy, and frequently perceived as a tender option for seniors who struggle with chewing or digesting raw alternatives. However, lurking behind this veil of consolation rests a peril far mightier than most elders fathom. Once produce is submerged in heavy syrup, it forfeits its status as a cardiac ally and morphs into something significantly more destructive, especially for a pump that has already clocked decades of relentless labor. The culprit is not the produce itself, but the viscous liquid encasing it. That fluid is not merely sugary, it is a dense solution of refined sweeteners and, within certain brands, added saline agents, two forces that conspire against a mature heart with nearly brutal effectiveness. The instant this syrup hits your bloodstream, it ignites a rapid escalation in glucose. For an older individual, particularly one grappling with sugar disease, borderline metabolic disorder, or cellular resistance to insulin, that escalation becomes a frontal assault on the vascular network. Elevated glucose inflames the inner skin of your conduits, robbing them of pliability, reducing their capacity to dilate, and leaving them susceptible to gummy buildup. Across time, these repeated sweet strikes can batter your cardiac muscle in ways that stay hushed until the moment your ribcage clamps or your wind feels short without preamble. Yet the threat does not halt with sweetness. Many preserved fruits incorporate added salt, a detail older Americans routinely miss because fruit is not supposed to taste salty. Still, it sits there. And that sodium forces your tissues to clutch onto fluid. For a youthful pump, this might produce trivial swelling. For an aging heart already battling unyielding pipes and diminished ejection force, this surplus liquid volume can turn crushing. It sludges the plasma, spikes the pressure, and compels the left chamber to shove harder with each stroke, gradually eroding the sinew that preserves your existence. In persons suffering from heart failure or uncontrolled hypertension, even a single container of syrup-soaked slices can launch days of cardiac burden that the weakened organ can no longer withstand. What makes this menace so uniquely terrifying is how convincingly nutritious these sealed cans appear. They look soft, comforting, and innocent. Many older individuals consume them daily, convinced they are selecting a protected, soothing alternative. Yet the myocardium registers every gram of sweetener, every unit of saline, every ounce of surplus volume that trails behind. And whether you perceive it or not, those selections can systematically dismantle the stability your heart relies upon, exhausting it, flooding it, and steering it toward a collapse you may never forecast. No one insists you must purge every canister from your storage space, but your cardiac tissue warrants truthfulness. And truthfulness unveils that the syrup transforming fruit into a sweet solace is the precise substance corroding your cardiac function from the inside outward. With advancing years, the tolerance for missteps narrows sharply. Each verdict matters infinitely more now than it ever did previously. And if jarred fruit in syrup can levy this degree of tension, envisage the threat in a beverage that bypasses every cautionary marker because it is marketed as untainted, organic, and cardioprotective, while flooding your veins with the potency of liquefied sugar. That next drink flows through nearly every household, and its toll on the senior heart might be the most stunning of them all. 5. Liquid fruit extracts. The fluid sweetness that can swiftly ravage and fatigue an aging circulatory pump. Throughout our nation, extracted fruit liquids have been permanently promoted as a beacon of vitality, a sparkling tumbler of citrus juice at sunrise, a compact carton of apple nectar packed for midday, a cooling sip on a balmy afternoon. And for numerous older adults, these beverages register as safe, mild, and even restorative. But as the calendars stack and the cardiac muscle becomes more brittle, the very trait that makes these drinks taste so pleasing transforms into the exact force that quietly menaces the heart. Because, in contrast to whole produce, extracted liquid slams into the body with the wallop of fluidized sugar. And for a senior vascular network already wrestling with rigidity, chronic irritation, and diminished rebound capacity, that abrupt wave can trigger a cascade of responses capable of impairing your heart in modes you might never detect until the window for intervention has closed. The harm ignites the second the liquid enters your plasma. Devoid of fibrous bulk to temper uptake, the sugar from these beverages inundates the organism within moments. This swift escalation forces your pancreas to eject a flood of regulatory hormone, and your vascular pipes must balloon rapidly to accommodate the abrupt burden. In a young adult, these tubes can flex adequately, but in someone traversing their 60s or later, where arterial linings have bulked up and pliability has faded, that instantaneous demand becomes a bodily physical assault. Each wave inflames the internal coating of the conduits, rendering them progressively more receptive to cholesterol accumulation. Over the long haul, this low-grade fiery response pinches the channels carrying oxygen to your myocardium, positioning it for enfeeblement or, under the harshest scenarios, catastrophic failures that can demolish the heart's functional capacity. For older persons dealing with sugar ailments, borderline glucose troubles, or elevated vascular pressure, these beverages turn even deadlier. Many extracted fruit drinks, even those branded as pure with zero supplementary sweeteners, pack a sugar punch mirroring carbonated soft drinks. This fluid sweetener rockets glucose readings to heights that can soundlessly injure nerve endings, filtration organs, and piping pathways alike. And as those channels calcify and lose give, the myocardium must thrust harder against swelling pushback, steadily grinding itself into exhaustion. A number of seniors initially register the aftermath as strange exhaustion, windlessness, or a weighty thumping within the torso following meals. Others perceive nothing whatsoever until the instant their cardiac muscle signals it can no longer sustain the pace. The emotional mirage holds enormous power. Bottled juice feels righteous, it feels earthy, it feels like an option any clinician would applaud. But the reality stands that even trivial daily portions can transform into an unyielding load upon a senior heart. Each vessel ferries a deluge of sweetener that the older physique can no longer process the way it once could during youth. The cardiac muscle, already locked in its solitary struggles with chronological wear, becomes ensnared in a loop of tension that incrementally scrapes away at its vigor. And irrespective of your awareness, those daily beverages can play a starring role in sapping your heart's capacity to guard your life. This is not a decree to exile juice from your days eternally, but your cardiac muscle warrants wariness, insight, and moves made with purposeful intent, not autopilot, sentiment, or ease of access. In these closing chapters, every resolution bears gravity, and your heart senses each selection far more acutely than you could ever feel yourself. And if these 5 classes of produce, so routine, so recognizable, can carry dangers this severe, what insight does that grant us about the covert fragilities of the senior heart? And what precise protective measures must every elder adopt promptly to defend their single most vital organ? The concluding message weaves all these cautions into the crucial reality each mature individual needs to internalize. The reality your myocardium craves you to absorb before the opportunity vanishes. As we cross into our 6th decade and beyond, the cardiac engine housed within our chest is no longer identical to the powerhouse that propelled us through youth, raised families, and endured decades of labor. It turns more fragile, more susceptible, and more readily swamped by the choices we previously executed without a flicker of doubt. The startling hazards concealed within common fruits, citrus, potassium-rich soft staples, desiccated snacks, syrup-laden preserves, and extracted juices are not intended to terrify you, but to rouse you toward a truth that painfully few older adults discover prior to a health catastrophe. Even deeply familiar provisions can silently compromise your cardiac stability once age. Pharmaceutical routines and lingering conditions alter your biological responses. The takeaway is not to dread produce. It is to honor the fact that your heart now operates with a drastically narrower buffer against error. Now, every glucose spike, every mineral surge, every concealed payload of syrup or sodium heaps pressure upon an apparatus that has already loyally served you across an entire existence. And exactly as your heart has ferried you through each joy and tribulation, it presently requires something reciprocal from you: alertness, deliberateness, and the readiness to execute decisions that reinforce its vigor instead of dismantling it. No person possesses the ability to peer inside their own arteries. None can feel plaques solidifying or electrical currents faltering, but the deterioration is authentic and entirely avoidable. You lack the power to revise the decades behind you, yet you hold the capacity to sculpt the seasons ahead by handling your heart with the prudence and devotion it has genuinely merited. And now that you recognize the covert perils tucked inside these daily foods, the subsequent query becomes inescapable. What concrete actions can older individuals embrace right now, at this very second, to safeguard their cardiac muscle and reclaim the vitality they still possess? These principles are designed to motivate you to inhabit your days completely and genuinely. Now, I genuinely wish to listen to your voice. Please pause, reflect, and share a solitary insight you have acquired and intend to apply within your own journey. Let us sustain one another along this pathway toward embracing these vital truths. If this broadcast brought you value, kindly leave a remark with the number 1. If it did not, feel free to type a 0. Your reactions carry immense weight for my channel. Kindly tap the like button, circulate this message, and subscribe to my channel for further material of this nature. Thank you for your attention, and here is to navigating life on your own chosen path.